All right, we are now live, so please go ahead, Richard. I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Richard Dunwoody, and I'm the Executive Director of Project Recover. Project Recover is a not-for-profit survivor-led corporation. Through a volunteer base of financial service executives, we support survivors of human trafficking, address the fraud and debt burden they face post-exploitation. I'm joined today by two survivors and a number of survivors advocates whom I'll introduce before they speak. The financial fraud schemes of traffickers leave survivors unable to move forward in rebuilding their lives. The federal and provincial governments are also targets of the schemes of traffickers. Other creditors that we've worked with over the last year, when they become aware of the survivor's exploitation, cease further recovery of these fraudulent debts. But both the federal and provincial governments knowingly continue to pursue survivors for repayment of these fraudulent debts. Over the last 12 months, I've put many survivors in front of their local MPPs. You're going to hear today from these survivors of the dismissive tone of their MPP's direct response. Months ago, many of us were horrified to hear of young ladies abducted out of a school in Nigeria, but it happens here. What should further outrage us is the government's persistent pursuit of survivors in our own country for repayment of fraudulent debt. The elements of trafficking include coercion and manipulation. These are the same elements that survivors endure in the government's pursuit of student loan debts. I met one survivor last year who had her $8,000 of her victim's compensation a number of years ago seized to repay a student loan. This is coercion, manipulation, and re-victimization of survivors. Every phone call from the Ministry of Finance in an attempt to recover this fraudulent debt is a reminder to the survivor of their trafficking exploitation. As they look to rebuild their lives, survivors' general source of income is government assistance program. Taxpayers should find it disturbing that the money intended to support those that need assistance is being pulled back into the government coffers to fund other initiatives of the government. The only position offered by members of the Conservative government to survivors is the absence of funding in the budget. They don't have the funding allocated to remove fraudulent debt. As any consumer who may be a victim of identity fraud with financial institutions would be appalled to hear that financial institution suggest that because they didn't build that fraud into their year's budget, those consumers would have to pay. For each year a victim is trafficked, the Ontario government earns through their portion of HST, paid on hotels and advertising of the victim, over $8,000. The average trafficking period, the government has earned $32,000. And think of what those victims had to do each and every day to put that money in the government's hand. And yet they seek repayment of the fraudulent debt. Private business owners, like one you'll hear from today, is putting the brilliant young people back in classrooms because the government refused to do so. We are educating them, empowering them as they take a place in making a difference in our society. As a dark blue conservative through my entire adult life, it pains me to be on a podium admonishing the party leadership for their inaction. In announcing the Combating Human Trafficking Act, Solicitor General Sylvia Jones said, "This legislation changes, if passed, will reinforce the strategy's key objectives of supporting survivors." Jill Dunlop, Associate Minister of Children and Women's Issues, said, "This proposed legislation further supports our cross-government support." They forgot to add one thing. They should have had, but we will remain vigilant, ensuring survivors repay the fraudulent debt. Today, we call on the Ontario government to end their abusive practice, to incorporate Motion 131 into the Combating Human Trafficking Act. I'm now going to turn over the podium to Laura Ross. Laura is starting a stage 2 program in the Kitchener-Waterloo area for survivors. Stage 2, the component is ensuring educational supports for survivors. Laura?
Thank you, Richard. Human trafficking is a global issue. It's also a Canadian issue. It's also an Ontario issue. 93% of sex trafficking victims are Canadian citizens. They are young women, almost half are children, who have had their lives stolen from them. They come from big cities and small towns. They come from advantaged homes and disadvantaged homes. They are high school students. They are university students. If it hasn't happened yet, unfortunately, it likely will, that at some point in your life, you will know someone who's been trafficked. I have worked with numerous survivors personally over the years, and they have all been strapped financially. They suffer from PTSD and high anxiety due to their experiences of being trafficked. They are often not able to hold a job longer than a few months. Counseling and therapy to address these issues are cost prohibitive, and the weight of student loans they have been straddled with by their trafficker is too large a debt for them to get out from under. We are grateful for advocates like Mr. Dunwoody who are pushing ahead for survivors in this way. But without legislative changes, survivors will continue to be re-victimized by paying a debt they don't owe. In the Ford government announcement on February 22nd, I quote Jill Dunlop, who said, "Our government has been absolutely clear that they will provide the support victims and survivors need to heal." I implore the government to make good on their statements and allow survivors of human trafficking to be removed from the overwhelming fraudulent OSAP loans, as continual denial to survivors to access education keeps them from moving ahead well in their healing journey.
We're going to now turn the podium over to a brilliant survivor that is pursuing her education objectives. Layla.
Hi there, guys. So today, I'd like to let you guys know I'm a human trafficking survivor, and along with that comes many obstacles. Once you've regained yourself, trying to make it out in the world afterwards, to pick up all the pieces you lost that no one thinks about. First, I'd like to thank Project Recover for their help in bringing this subject to the forefront and for all the work they do in helping us survivors. I'd also like to thank Women's Support Network of York Region for all their work in helping survivors as well get to where they want to be. Project Recover has helped us with funding for school, as now the government won't. Not everyone is as lucky to get the help they need or know where to turn to ask for the help. Every time that phone rings, my first thought is, how much will I have to take out of my daughter's mouth this month to please the government for a debt that was never my fault? I'm re-victimized and shamed over and over again every time the phone rings. I've shelled out thousands of dollars to get back on my feet that I've had to beg and borrow for just to help pay the government back to try and somewhat get ahead. I'm a mom, and supporting my children, myself, and trying to pay my debt off is almost impossible. But what do I do when I need a degree to further myself in my future? I never got my degree due to being pulled out of school by my trafficker, and I still owe money for that. So what came out of this experience is two things. I didn't benefit from the degree, which I am now trying to pursue, and I can't because of this outstanding debt that hangs over my head. And every single time that phone rings, it's a reminder of what happened in my past life, the pain I went through, and also the pain of not being able to go for what I wanted when I wanted it. I now have a chance to really do something amazing, and I feel defeated and manipulated by the government and dismissed as someone wanting to change their future, but doesn't have the help to do so. I've gotten accepted in one of Canada's most elite colleges, but how am I supposed to pay for it? I'm stuck, and us survivors deserve some answers and some help so we can be the contributing members of society that we're expected to be and we're striving to be. I feel let down by MPPs who have offered help and have failed to return phone calls and emails after being extremely moved by the cause, as they would say, but yet no real work comes from these conversations other than Chris Glover. And we are then left in the dark asking why we're not being heard. We are hoping today that our voices can be heard, and there are girls who want to better their lives and help others. But we need to remove these fraudulent debts from the survivors' records for good. We also need faith and the government to support us through it. I hope you understand the importance of what we are trying to accomplish here and get through to the government that we need your help. We need you to stop preventing all survivors from moving forward in life due to the unreasonable debts that we have all incurred, but should have never incurred in the first place due to our circumstances in human trafficking. Thank you for listening today, and always remember to stay lifted.
Thank you, Layla. Now I'm going to turn the podium over to a business leader and somebody whose business has been hit hard by the pandemic, has continuously supported us educating survivors over the last 2 terms. Anthony.
Thanks, Richard. So today I'm speaking on behalf as being a father, not as a father who has had a child that has been human trafficked, but as a father who can't fathom the fact of children being human trafficked. You know, it really defies logic that this exists. I think when you look over and you look at the entertainment world, and I think we portrayed this idea that this is a foreign issue. This is something that doesn't happen in our backyard. And I think Laura mentioned this is something that hits home. This is someone down the street. So the circumstances are this: we really have to put a huge investment and put awareness. And this is one of the reasons why I have and I always will support Project Recover and the awareness. My companies, and as Richard said, despite the pandemic challenges we're going through, this is something as a father you can never overlook. You know, when you look at certain things, how these people have been victimized and violated, and they're just trying to get their life back in order. Being a father of a 21-year-old, you can't really put words to illustrate how devastating it could be to families. You know, so for me, you know, I'm a big advocate that, you know, with the help of the government, and I think the moral of this is you have to put political persuasion aside here, and you have to say to yourself what's right for the future of life and of these women, and you know, for the most part, it's always tabloided as it's women. There could be other children involved in this, and this is the sad thing, is as parents and as business leaders and political leaders, we need to really rally behind this. And you know, we have to really remove the fraudulent debts, the OSAP debts from their credit records. You know, there's no way they're ever going to be able to put themselves on a new journey to chart their lives if they're always going to have to be victims of the past. So for me, you know, I'm a big advocate in trying to set a new journey for these women. And I give a lot of kudos to Richard, Laura, and MPP Chris Glover on trying to get this moving forward. You know, we've got so many issues in life, but you know, when it hits family and it hits home, and on a serious note, when Laura mentioned, you know, at some point in time, you're going to come across this in your own personal life, and you're going to reflect on, you know, what you could have done to make a difference. So again, I think we really have to rally around everything and really start helping these women get their lives back in order.
Thank you, Tony. Now I'm going to turn over the podium to yet another survivor. And this young woman is simply amazing. And all that she has endured, what she's encountered, she fights through it. But yet she's being denied an education. And we're going to make certain that she gets into the school next year, okay? With or without the government's help. The government has the opportunity to engage now. Amanda, podium's yours.
Thank you, Richard. So when I became a survivor, I was faced with huge debts. I was forced to file bankruptcy. I had no other choice, and OSAP or these loans, they aren't included in your bankruptcy. So I had this giant number hanging over my head, and it makes it really hard to focus on the healing journey. I am just now finding out who I am. I do want to go back to school. I really do. I want to start my new life fresh, and I really don't want all this past debt hanging over me. Some people can't even get approved, and that's what's holding me back at this moment in time. So removing the fraudulent debts from survivors' records would be a huge help for all of us. Like now I know what I want to do with my life. Like being trafficked, it sets you back. I'm 30-ish and feel as though I just graduated high school. Like I'm just entering the world now. And this is the case for a lot of us. I'm not the only one. I keep thinking that, you know, if I go back to the sex trade, it'd be so much easier to pay it all off and to re-enter school. If I managed to live to survive again, I could heal again, but that's not an option for me, and it's not an option for any of us. It took me 7 years from the moment I survived to get to where I am right now, where I feel normal or healthy enough to start my life, this new life of mine. In a previous meeting with an MPP, I was offered a paid PSW schooling. I denied it because that's not my path. I would really love to get into grief work, but I can't. Like, I can't go back to school right now because of all this debt. I'm, as Laura said earlier, like normal jobs, when you're struggling with PTSD, like employers really don't understand what we're going through. I personally, I strive to be a normal human. I strive to work normal jobs. I've been in therapy for 7 years working on this. And I think the only way for me to attain this goal of mine is to find a career that is meant for me. PSW is not that career. I would personally, I think I would do really well giving back to the community through grief. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And, you know, to touch on one thing that Amanda said, both Laura and I were on that phone call with that MPP. And twice her dismissive nature of what a survivor faces was, I call it concerning in my brief. I find it appalling, to say the least. Chris, I'll move the podium over to you.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me here today. You know, what we're asking for is very simple. We're just asking the government to remove fraudulent OSAP debts from survivors' records. And this government introduced on February 22nd, they introduced Bill 251, which is a human trafficking bill. And it's got some steps in the right direction to help eliminate and capture traffickers. But it does not have, it does not have enough supports for survivors to heal. And one of the glaring omissions in this bill is they do not acknowledge that the government is pursuing survivors for government fines and for OSAP debts. And we've just heard from Amanda and Layla, two survivors of human trafficking, who want to get on with their lives. They want to attend post-secondary education, college or university, so that they can heal and build their futures. But they're being held back by these fraudulent OSAP debts. And we've also heard from Layla that, you know, the government keeps phoning her and asking her to pay off these fines that she does not owe, these OSAP debts that she does not owe. And so what Project Recover is asking for here is just for the government to remove those fraudulent OSAP debts from their records. It's a very simple ask. I introduced a motion 131 in the House in December, asking for this very thing. If the government would just adopt that motion as an amendment to their bill, this could be taken care of. And I really hope the government is listening. I hope they will do the right thing and help survivors get on with their lives. And I want to give a special, thank you to Richard, to Laura, to Anthony, for all your work with Project Recover and helping survivors to heal and to move on with their lives. And I especially want to thank Amanda and Layla for coming here today and sharing your stories and advocating not only for yourselves, but for all survivors of human trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So just in closing, before you get to question, Project Recover last year represented and advocated on behalf of 167 survivors in our first year. Another compelling statistic released 2 weeks ago is the York Regional Police reported last year 280 individual cases of human trafficking solely in the York region. Our process we undertake is reviewing transactional records on each credit facility a survivor has. So post this press conference, there are people that want to reach out to me, get those stats, get those numbers. I'm happy to illustrate the size and scope that this is impacting our young people in our community. For now, I'll turn it over to you if there are any questions.
Thanks so much, Richard. So we are now ready for media questions. For journalists and anybody on the line who would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. And once you raise your hand, I will unmute you and allow you to speak. We just ask that you mention your name and the news outlet you're working for, followed by one question and one follow-up. So we'll give you a minute now to find that raise hand function. Not seeing any raised hands at the moment, but if you would like, we will be sending out a media release, including a contact for media to ask further questions of any of the speakers. So please look out for that. I'll pass it back to you, Richard, to wrap up.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.